1842, towers over the American Renaissance, but not, as he also should, as philosopher king of American white race theory. Widely hailed for his enormous intellectual strength and prodigious output, Emerson wrote the earliest full-length statement of the ideology later termed Anglo-Saxonist in the United States. We ordinarily locate both white masculine ginger panic and spread-eagle Anglo-Saxonism in the turn of the 20th century, but Emerson laid them out half a century earlier in the 1850s. In an influential treatise and oft-repeated lectures, he portrayed the American as Saxon. Saxon as manly man, and separated the genealogy of the American Saxon from that of the Celt. Deftly and subtly, Emerson elevated the Saxons and disappeared the Celts. Emerson makes it extremely clear that Saxon, or later Anglo-Saxon, is not a synonym for white, even though the historiographical literature often seems to equate them. My remarks this evening come from my work in progress, The History of White People, which W. W. Norton will publish in 2009. The book offers a sort of counter-history of prominent theme in Western thought, and it historicized the notion of the white races. Let me state categorically that I do not underestimate or ignore the overwhelming importance of black race in United States history. A truly gigantic literature exists to explain the meaning, importance, and honest-to-God reality of the existence of race when it means black. By concentrating on the white races, I do not overlook or downplay the fundamental nature of concepts of black race. After all, the United States, as a nation, was founded by and for, largely for the owners of African slaves. Over the course of some 200 years, federal, state, and local governments have labored to define black race, a history we recognize all too well. We know that concepts of black race identity have changed over time in terms of naming and in terms of ostensible biological basis. So far, this sophistication does not extend across the color wheel. Statutory and biological definitions of white race remain notoriously vague, the leavings of what is not black. But this vagueness does not indicate disinterest, quite to the contrary. Another gigantic literature exists, much less known today, explaining the meaning, importance, and honest-to-God reality of the existence of white races. White, but now usually unraced race. We may be accustomed to alterations in the meaning of colored race. We hear the passage from colored to Negro to black to African American as changing discourse. But we're much less able to comprehend the less salient but equally mutable discourse of whiteness. I should say whitenesses. I further say white races in the plural because for the better part of a century, Americans believed in the existence of more than one European race. During the 100 years of working-class European immigration, about 1830 to about 1924, scholars labored long and hard to racialize people already considered white in phenotypical and purely legal terms. This history of the meanings of white race can be harder to see, for the concept prevailing today of one capacious white race can obscure a complex past. We need to keep in mind that the idea of one big white race dates back only to the middle of the 20th century, becoming hegemonic during the New Deal and the Second World War. In the 1930s and 1940s, Southern determination to keep the Negroes down permeated federal law, sealing off, notably, as David Freund said in his prize-winning book, New Deal policies affecting housing. The war against German National Socialists delegitimized racist ideologies, and after the war, a rising black civil rights movement defeated legal segregation and disfranchisement. That civil rights movement also elevated the salience of black-white difference. Black-white emphasis transformed white races into white ethnicities, obscuring the earlier plural history of whitenesses. So this evening, I want to go backwards, back before the New Deal in the Second World War consolidated Euro-Americans into one white race, back before the early 20th century immigration of people from Southern and Eastern Europe inspired scholarly examination of the races of Europe, back to the time when impoverished, hard-working Irish immigrants were racialized as Celts, back to the 1850s when Ralph Waldo Emerson lent his golden pen to the ideology we know as Anglo-Saxonism. Although Emerson gave American Anglo-Saxonism its most eloquent presentation, he did not invent it. Thomas Jefferson, among other Americans in Britain, also believed in the Saxon myth, a story of American descent from Saxons by way of England. Jefferson's fascination with the Saxons and the Old English began during his student days at William and Mary College, and he carried a belief in Americans' Saxon roots to his grave.